Hey everybody, welcome to episode 64 of FoundersGyan and thanks for tuning in. This week we have marketing guru Neil Patel on the show and our topic for today's discussion is DIY marketing for startups. It's a very short episode and packed with value, so I'll be taking only about 20 minutes of your time. Do check out foundersgyan.com/EP64 for the show notes that gives you links and notes to all that we talk about on the show. Alright, so without further ado, I welcome the one and only Neil Patel. Neil, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you on the show, and it's a great honor to host you on the show, Neil. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Neil, a lot of our listeners obviously would know you. You're considered one of the biggest persons in marketing. But for those of our listeners who are living under a rock or something, maybe how do you describe yourself to these people? What's your quick one line or two line intro about yourself?
I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a marketer. And I just like creating companies that help others grow from a traffic and conversion standpoint.
Right. Okay. So our audience is mostly made up of startups. So we will try to keep this as generic as possible from a startup perspective. Although, of course, obviously, the things we talk about could be used for other companies as well. Now, one of the key things that I've seen in my 50 plus interviews with various startup founders is that marketing is kind of downplayed in the startup world, and a lot of people seem to try and get things like product fit right or lean startup method and so on and so forth. But the importance of marketing is kind of lost on a lot of startups. So could you talk a bit in brief about how important it is for a startup to have a good marketing engine in place?
It's really important. And more importantly, it's really good for a startup to have a good marketing engine in place that doesn't revolve around paid advertising. Reason being is just expensive, right? So for a startup, it's hard for them to spend a lot of money on marketing when they're strapped for funds. And you need to come up with processes and test and figure out what's working for you and what's not. You won't have enough time. And for that reason, you want to focus on what's the lowest hanging fruit and go from there. But it comes down to, a concept like throwing spaghetti on the wall. It's like testing different marketing strategies, and whatever sticks is what you should focus on at the beginning.
Right. Excellent. So that brings up a very, very nice point. And our talk today is going to revolve around a bit of DIY marketing for startups. So obviously, marketing is a huge subject, and obviously, if we can cover everything there is to in 30 minutes, then probably you won't. There's no need for you. So we all know that that's not possible. But we will try and condense as much information as possible to startups in this episode. But before we go there, I was just a bit curious. Were you always a great marketing guru, or did you have your falls before you really became what you are to marketing?
I had a lot of falls. Eventually, you figure out what works, but I've just been doing it so long that eventually you get decent at it, right? But no, by no means is marketing like I wasn't the best marketer or anything like that. I just had a lot of falls, learned from my mistakes, been doing it long enough, and I got good at it.
Right, and I think that brings me nicely to the point that startups, because they are cash strapped, as you said, and most startups are in a bootstrap stage. They don't have the flexibility to have so many falls and get up and try again and again. So they need some ideas and methods that work for them. So before we get into the exact tips, do you see marketing as different from say growth hacking, from digital marketing, or do they all work together? What's your opinion on? There are so many buzzwords around marketing, right?
Yeah, I think they all do work well together. So you just have to play around with each of them and see what's right for your business, but they all do work. The trick is to see what do you think is the quickest strategy to grow your business, and it varies for each type. Some think it's SEO, and SEO is a long-term strategy. Some think it's social media, but social media doesn't convert as well as SEO. Some say it's running Facebook ads and just doing arbitrage, spending less than what each customer's worth. But for that to be possible, you have to have a really fine-tuned conversion funnel, right? So it just comes down to what are you going to start testing with and tweaking and go from there.
Right. So let's talk about from a startup's perspective, kind of like the biggest tips that you can think about in your own experience, and how do they go about testing each of these different things? Should it be simultaneous? What do you think should be a good would be a good strategy?
I do believe it should be simultaneous at the beginning, because then that'll help you quickly determine what's going to work and where you should focus your efforts on. I wouldn't recommend doing 10 things at once, but at the beginning, pick like 3 tactics and try them out at the same time. The reason I say 3, it's enough where you can try a decent shot at each of them. If you're doing like 5 or 10, it's too many. You won't give any of them a good shot. And if you just do one, then if the one didn't work, then you wasted your time. And you're still back to square one. So you want to just, when you're starting off, test out a few of them, like 2 or 3, see which ones are working, and then focus on the one that works the best. Or if none of them work, go find 2, 3 more other strategies and go try those out.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about specifically some of these strategies. What in your mind is like top 2 or 3 strategies that say an early stage startup or a startup that's just beginning to get some traction should use?
So, if you're early stage startup, the strategies I would try out are content marketing, SEO, social media marketing, and then I would also test out paid advertising like Facebook, not Google AdWords because it's much more expensive, but I would test out Facebook and see what happens there. And I would just start off with those and then go from there. But as I mentioned, you only want to pick 3 of them. So you may realize that content marketing is too much work. So you can try with SEO, social media marketing, and let's say Facebook ads.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned that Google AdWords is quite expensive, and you mentioned that stick with Facebook ads. But I've also seen some reports that Bing ads work. I don't know who uses Bing, the search engine, but what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, Bing ads work well too. They don't have as much volume because their traffic's lower, but I would test out Bing ads as well.
Okay, excellent. Now, let's talk about the best advice you've ever heard and you try to follow in your own business and life, something to do with marketing, if possible.
The best advice that I've ever heard is marketing strategies eventually all become competitive, right? Which is true, because like Google AdWords will only become more expensive and competitive. Same with Facebook ads, same with SEO. But what I learned at an early age, and this was advice I got from someone else, is the marketers who win are typically the ones who are creative, who think outside the box. Because it's those strategies which make marketing possible for startups. Look at Dropbox. If they did a paid advertising for an account, it would have cost them $200 to $300. But the referral program works so well, right?
Right.
So it comes down to testing.
Okay, excellent. Now, we talked about some of the biggest tips, which is try out various strategies in parallel. And is there like a clean or a definite ROI that we can have as a standard of measure? Is it conversions over time? What would you say is the baseline? Because I've spoken to a few people and a few of them have told me that the x-axis or the baseline, the measure should always be against time when it comes to marketing. So would you agree to that? Would you have a different take on that?
Well, I look at it as how much money are you spending, your revenue, and of course time as well too, right? So you want to do as well as quick as possible. Because over time, most people can do well, but you wanna end up seeing if you can do well as quick as possible.
Right. Okay. Now, what about the biggest pitfalls? We've talked about biggest tips. What have you seen that people do that seem like good at first glance, but actually are probably counterintuitive and bad?
The biggest pitfall I see is sometimes companies make decisions purely off of conversion rates and data, but it can hurt their long-term effect. And I do believe that data is right almost all of the time. But let me give you an example of this. And we made this mistake. If you go to Hello Bar right now, there are new versions coming up, but the current site just optimized for URL entry. And that's fine. We get the most URLs and the entries and signups from that. But people don't know what the product does, and in the long run, I bet you it hurts conversions because no one knows what Hello Bar does. It hurts with the branding. You get what I mean?
Right. Yeah, can't understand what it means.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So in the short run, you may do really well, but in the long run, it can hurt you. So you got to do a balancing act between both.
Right. Okay. So I think this is kind of I just read the Lean Startup by Eric Rice, and he talks about vanity metrics. So sometimes he argues that just conversion rates and even income isn't a good indicator of your growth, and rather it should be is your hypothesis correct? What is the value you're providing? What is the growth you're trying to get? So does that tie in with kind of with that, or is
That's
this a
correct.
slightly?
Well, we do look at income and revenue growth, but we also look at growth month over month. We do it over the base. So, are you growing at a faster pace each and every single month, or is your growth slowing down? Is it churn? Are users happy? Right? We look at the metrics that we feel will impact the business in the long run.
If you like this show, do follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The link is www.facebook.com/FoundersGyan and twitter.com/FoundersGyan. Both these provide you daily tips and articles as well as resources to help and inspire your startup. There are multiple tips per day. Some examples of these tips would be articles on the latest startups, growth hacking tips, how do you build team for startups, how to get funding, etc. So don't forget facebook.com/FoundersGyan and twitter.com/FoundersGyan. Okay. So that's one, the metrics. Is there anything else that you would say that most startups or people new to marketing do, which kind of seems straightforward but is not actually something they should do?
Yeah, when a startup is starting off, and most companies, they realize that, let me just go out there and figure out how to get press or partnerships. And they do a great job of this. But what they do wrong is they create the press, but what is there to create press about? Just because you create press about a feature, if you can't figure out how to generate signups from that, then who cares? And it's not just about brand awareness. It's about, hey, what's the long-term strategy? Are all these efforts actually helping out generating more signups, happier customers? The way we look at it is, instead of just focusing on getting press even for the smallest thing, why not put the users first and focus on making them happy and making sure that they love the product or service? Because in the long run, that's going to help you win.
Right. So I just want to concentrate on that a little. So you mentioned that when people have a press release, they do all the hustle and hard work and get the press release, and surely the press release brings with it a spike of users curious to know about your site, right? And wouldn't that automatically kind of convert well if you already have a good landing page in place? So why is it that you're saying just a good press release wouldn't be sufficient to do conversions?
Just because you get press doesn't mean it's something that actually impacts your users. A lot of companies and startups create press around stuff that their users don't really care about. So you don't want to just create press for the sake that someone's going to write about you. If it doesn't benefit your users and make their experience better, then who cares?
Right. Okay. Excellent advice, Neil. Thank you so much for that. Now, let's take a step back, and it's a very personal question. So, is there a moment that you can think about in your own journey, one of the worst entrepreneurial moments in your own journey, and the lessons you learned from it? Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, the worst part in my journey is I invested roughly $1 million into a software as a service, or not software service, cloud hosting company. Cloud hosting wasn't really out at this time. New concept. We weren't the first to create it, but just new concept. And I lost over $1 million of my own money and borrowed money. The reason it failed, and this is my big mistake, is the idea was great, but the people were terrible executors. And I learned at that point, it's not just about the idea in a business. You're investing in people. Ideas come and go. They change. If you don't have the right team, things won't succeed.
Right. Okay. So have a good team in place, right? I think that's one of the key for any business. Otherwise, it's just not. I mean, you could be the greatest person, but somebody in your team could just pull you down, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, let's talk about some tools and resources, maybe even some books that you, Neil, recommend for startups in terms of marketing. What would be your biggest tools, resources, and books that you would recommend to people?
So for tools, resources, and books, I would say books Art of the Start is a great book by Guy Kawasaki. The Dip by Seth Godin. Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Steve Blank has a good book. And then as for resources, TechCrunch, Mashable. What else? Those are actually the main two sites I read for startup stuff. I also read The Economist. As for resources, I say Google. It's my favorite resource, right? Or tips or tools. You can just Google for almost anything that you need, and then you can learn it. That's where I get most information from. As for tools for marketing, I use BuzzSumo a lot, Ahrefs, SEMrush. Those are like three main tools. I use Google Analytics a lot as well. I use HelloBar a lot. Those are the main tools I use.
Right, right. A lot of tools there. So that's we'll link all those up on the show notes. And I believe that you have your own podcast called the Marketing School, right? That's a 10-minute podcast every single day, is it?
That's correct. 10 minutes of marketing advice every single day.
Yep. So that's a great tool too for startups if they want to learn more about marketing from you and a co-host. Sorry, I'm not getting the name of your co-host.
Eric Sue.
Eric. So okay, great. Now let's. We are coming to the end of the interview now. If there are like a few action items, one or two action items, or maybe even one action item that startups can take from this show, and you'd like to see startups implement, what do you think some of those action items should be as a matter of urgency for any startup if they don't already do this?
It really varies. I would just look at your numbers or the metrics that are the most important to you and go see which channel do you think can have the biggest impact or tweak can have the biggest impact and focus on that first. So start prioritizing things based on low-hanging fruit and that's easy to implement and has a big impact. And if you don't have any of those, then go look for things that are big impact but medium work and, like time commitment wise. So.
Right, and what about say hiring marketing professionals or somebody like you yourself hiring somebody like you? Would that be something that you would recommend for startups, or should the companies be a little bit more established before they spend money on people and experts like yourself?
They can do either one. It really varies on the company size. What we always tell people is you should just evaluate and do what you think is the best fit for you. Like, there's no answer. I've seen them both work, right? You can do it yourself, hire people. If you don't have experience, you can learn it. Like, it really varies a lot, right?
Right, right. And what about if people want you for consulting deals? I know a lot of listeners just are in love with Neil Patel and your marketing strategies. So are you too busy to work with people, or how does it work? How if somebody wants to hire, say, you, what's the best way to hire you?
I don't really do much consulting these days. They can email me at neil@neilpatel.com, but I don't really do too much consulting.
Okay, great. So, and yeah, that brings me to my last but one question. So, the best way to reach out to you, I know you get tons of emails, so maybe email isn't the right way. What's Twitter? What's
Yeah, Twitter's Neil Patel. Facebook is Neil K. Patel.
Right. Okay. So people can reach out to you by these means, but they should keep their message short, right? One or two sentences, right?
They get the best responses from me when it's short.
Okay. Cool. So I just have one final question, and this is how I end all my interviews. And so, if there is only one gyan that you could give with regards to marketing for startups, what would that be? Only one gyan. Forget that all the things you have said is going to air. Maybe I'll just air one piece of advice. What would that be?
Keep testing. Just because something works now doesn't mean it always will work, or doesn't mean that it can't be improved. Marketing is about testing and iteration.
Okay, Neil. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. It was a real pleasure having you on the show, and thanks a lot.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do check out foundersgyan.com/EP64 for the show notes, and do tune in next week for yet another interesting discussion that'll be useful for startups. I'll see you all next week. In the meantime, do take action on your own startup, and good luck on your startup adventure and journey. Bye for now.